featured guest tonight is responsible for some of the most famous songs of his era, and as founding member of the band Toto, he has ensured his imprint on music history will never be forgotten, not to mention his output as a studio musician for some of the biggest names in music history. Here to chat about all his wonderful years in the band Toto and his new debut solo album, Forgotten Toys, is none other than Toto founding member David Paich. David, welcome to the show.
Hey, how are you out there?
Doing dandy. So I know creativity runs in your family. How much influence would you say your dad had on the kind of artist that you became?
My father had a lot to do with what I became. He had a major influence in me when I was young. He was a jazz pianist. So from the age of 5 on, I can remember hearing him play jazz piano while he was writing arrangements for people like Ella Fitzgerald, Mel Torme, and Ray Charles. So it was around the house all the time, and really good music too that was popular. It was on the radio. You could hear it. And so I got tuned into the radio and how to make records for the radio, and just in general, great music through my father, who was really a legend as a arranger, as an orchestra arranger. And I can say he was, I studied under his tutelage for many years, watching him write arrangements and helping him out. And it was a magical experience.
Now, like you said, he was pretty much a legend in jazz. I'm curious if there was any particular reason why you didn't follow in that genre specifically.
It required a certain amount of dexterity and commitment. I was more into rock and roll, and I was dabbling at jazz, but you have to play jazz 24/7 to be a good jazz player. So I didn't have that commitment, and but I still love dabbling at jazz to this very day. I still practice piano and still play a little bit of jazz, but I didn't want to do anything I couldn't be really great at. And I knew that I knew for some reason I couldn't master the art of jazz piano playing. So I jumped into rock and roll with both feet.
Was your dad ever concerned about you being a musician as well, or did he know that you'd kind of find a way to be able to support yourself like he did?
He was very concerned because he's a professional, and as a professional, he didn't want to have to be making excuses for his son, who wasn't a very good player. So he had a few serious talks with me about knuckling down and just taking the piano lessons seriously. So I studied classical piano for 4 or 5 years, playing 7 days a week, 3 hours a day, practicing. And this helped me to achieve a sound and a dynamic that I wouldn't have had before. And also helped my technique. So I was able to play on records. By the time I got out of high school, I was doing sessions.
So, and like you said, your father really did work with some of the biggest names of his era. What did that make life like for you as a kid? I mean, did you comprehend how special it all was, or did it just feel like normal life as a kid because you didn't know any different?
It felt like normal life, but occasionally there were special circumstances where my dad would be called to, say, the Greek theater, and they would, someone would be in concert, like a Sammy Davis Jr., and they'd put a spotlight on my father. So I knew that he was a very important man. They made him stand up out of the audience. But other than that, he was just my father, and I used to sharpen his pencils and make sure he had plenty of erasers, and kept quiet most of the time I was in the room with him.
Now, did I get this right that you, the Porcaros, and Steve Lukather all went to the same high school? I mean, were you guys friends in high school?
They all went to the same high school. I went to a different high school. I went to a place called Chaminade, which was an all-boys college prep school in the West Valley. Well, they were in the eastern mid-valley. Went to Grant High School, all the rest of the Porcaros and Lukather.
And then each of you guys, as I understand it, had some of your own successes prior to Toto. And I know you were involved with Boz Scaggs' 5-time platinum album, Silk Degrees. How did that opportunity come about?
That happened thanks to Jeff Porcaro, who I'm very grateful for. Boz Scaggs was producing an album by a guitarist named Les Dudek, who played with the Allman Brothers. And it was a blues album, and they needed a keyboard player. So Jeff, who was my friend and we played a lot together. Had been doing some sessions. Recommended me, and that's how I met Boz Scaggs, who was looking to do a collaboration on his next album. And I raised my hand for and volunteered. And Jeff told him that I would be the best candidate for a collaboration. So we sat down at a piano, grand piano, and wrote most of the Silk Degrees album.
When was the first time you guys talked about putting your own band together? Putting together Toto?
We always talked about it when we left high school, and Jeff and I went on the road with other artists. We talked about putting the band back together someday, the high school band, or having a band of some sort, some configuration. So as we kept playing on the road, we met David Hungate, and then we brought Steve Porcaro in, who's traveling with Gary Wright. We brought him in, and we were the Boz Scaggs backing band for a while, which entailed myself, Jeff Porcaro, David Hungate, and Steve Porcaro. So we had a little bit, a few of the components for Toto right there. And then after that album hit big, I decided, like a natural evolution, to move on to doing our own thing.
Walk us through Toto I. I believe you composed the majority of that album, right?
I did, because I had been writing longer than anybody else, and the band we hadn't started collaborating at that point too much. But the first song, Child's Anthem, came out of my classical upbringing with piano. And so I wanted to do something different on Toto. I wanted to start out with an instrumental that kind of gave me the flavor for what was supposed to come. And we had orchestra on it. My dad conducted the orchestra with French horns and strings. And it was a really powerful event when we did that. And we played it live, and it went over live very well too.
Did you feel like when you were writing what you're writing was special, or did it feel like work at the moment? In other words, did you have any inkling that it was as going to be as good as it was?
I felt like it had the potential to be special, and I felt, of course, didn't have my track record was in Boz Scaggs before then, but I felt confident that we could make these songs come alive because of the musicianship in the band that I had. They were very great. And brought a lot to the table, Toto I and Toto IV were albums pretty much on constant rotation for me. 4 still blows my mind at what you guys were able to accomplish with that record. You had a heavy influence on that album. Did anything feel different in the studio working on that record? I mean, did you have any inkling you were making an album that would go like quadruple platinum? We did. The first song that we finished was Rosanna, and that gave us an inkling of what the bar had been set for that record. So, and there was I have to say, there was a lot of collaboration on that album too. So you're hearing a diverse band co-writing together on that album, and it had a lot of different styles on it too as well. And we were able to use the LSO, the London Symphony Orchestra, on a cut called "Afraid of Love," which was to me a landmark piece for us. I think McCartney's "Live and Let Die" had come out, and I'd heard the orchestra on it, and I really was pining to get the LSO on the record. And I know you had sole writing credit on Rosanna, and I want to talk a little bit more about that I down later in some of the other questions about how that song is set up and the critical acclaim that it got. What was the creation story of that song? I know there have been people who said Rosanna Arquette. Is that where that originates from? It didn't originate from her. It was originated from my first high school sweetheart that I had, but I didn't have a name for it yet. I had the whole song written, and Rosanna walked in the room, and I met her, and I just fell in. She was adorable, and so I, like everybody else that met her, had a crush on her, and I used her name because it fit perfect for the song. So that's how that happened. And other than that, I was really influenced by Thom Bell and the Philadelphia sound, like the Spinners and the OJs, which is that bridge that goes, not quite a year since she went away. That part right there. I was influenced, and I wanted to just show a little bit of diversity in the kinds of sections there were as far as the musicality of it. And I thought that the band just performed brilliantly with this keyboard solo, Steve Porcaro, myself, and Steve Lukather's guitar solo, and then of course Jeff Porcaro's wonderful drum intro, and then the big jam fest at the very end.
And it's interesting because that song does have, it's got kind of the keyboard and the guitar solo, and those are things I don't think at that time you heard. I mean, you'd have one in a song, but it was one of the first songs that I know that had kind of two, and in that kind of way. I mean, now you have bands like Rush, and YYZ, and they'll do all that stuff.
Absolutely. And in fact, they were right in the middle of the song, made it different too, but they were so unbelievably musical that it fit,